There was a woman, she was having her first baby quite late in life. She was absolutely terrified about childbirth. She wanted to labor and have a vaginal birth, and her opinion was, I'm going to have an epidural instantaneously. Well, that's fine from the Birthing Better viewpoint. Well, she wasn't really willing to learn a lot of the other skills. However, she did spend time working through the breathing lessons and working through the pain lessons with her partner. So they did work together. And this is the story that she told after the birth. She said the beginning of labor, the pains weren't terribly strong. She used her breathing, but they were fine, really. She didn't have a problem. Then they got really more intense as labor progressed. And what she said happened was that at the beginning of the contraction, and remember, you're going to learn about the 5 phases of contraction, so you'll understand this story more. Very beginning, phase 1 of the contraction, she set up her breathing. She reminded herself about her breathing. This is not a conversation about breathing here. This is a conversation about pain. But she set up the breathing. This is why these skills interface. So she set up her breathing, and in the first inhale, she could breathe in and expand inside her pelvis. She could feel it. And when she would breathe out that first exhale, she could go around the inside of her pelvis and soften. And then she screamed the rest of the contraction. And then there'd be a pause. In the beginning of the next intense contraction, that first inhalation, she said, I can feel myself breathe in and expand. I can feel myself breathe out and soften. And then I screamed. Now, why is this an important story? For people who were outside of her, all they saw was a screaming woman. But for her, every contraction, she had some control over that beginning part. Imagine if she hadn't had that. It would have been a different experience, because after the birth, her comment was, yes, I used an epidural hours later than I thought I would have. Her next comment was very telling, which was, next time I have a baby, I'm absolutely certain that the next inhale and the next exhale, I can open up and soften inside. I still might scream for the rest of the contraction. So this is a perfect Birthing Better story. I want to tell you another Birthing Better story. There was a couple that worked very intimately on these skills. They really thoroughly enjoyed doing it. The husband gained so much from it, and his wife felt that he would really be there for her. As birth unfolded, he said she was absolutely gorgeous to watch. She was so in control, and she just knew what she was doing. And this was their first birth. And what the woman was saying was that at the beginning of each contraction, she set up her breathing pattern. She understood what she needed to do. She needed to inhale and expand in her pelvis, exhale and soften in her pelvis, and then work through each contraction, adjusting and adapting her breathing and her internal softening. And she was able to do it. And then at a certain point, she said to herself, this is really quite easy to cope with. I don't really think that breathing matters. So she intentionally decided at the beginning of the next contraction, she wouldn't bother to set up the breathing. And she said it was so intense. She just absolutely freaked. Now remember, her conversation was in her head. Her husband had no idea what she was thinking. The only thing he saw was this instantaneous change from a woman who was so coping well and managing well to a woman who was totally out of control. Now, a dad without skills wouldn't have had a clue what to do. However, he was a dad with skills, and he was a Birthing Better dad. So he knew his number one job was to keep her focused and on track. So he just literally got in her ear and got in her face and stayed right with her between contractions and in every phase of every contraction, modeling best breathing pattern to help her gain control. It took them 5 contractions for her to get back in control. Now, what she was saying was, he started to work with me right away, but I was so freaked by what had happened that it took me 5 contractions to really pay attention to him and really agree to work with him. But as I worked with him more and more, I gained that control. And after those 5 contractions, she went back to having much more control, even though the pain was much more intense. And he was able to see and hear whether she was coping well and help with modeling the breathing when he felt it was getting too intense. This is how Birthing Better families work together.